So for today's video I wanted to have a bit more of a relaxed approach to the subject matter, but on top of that I wanted to try and tackle the many arguments that would inevitably crop up on the subject of what is and is not cheating in sports. For those that don't know, sports are a fantastic way of ascertaining who is the best, with the exception being internet blood sports. That, at best, is a popularity contest, and I don't think anyone on there is a winner. In athletics, it's simply down to things like races, number of sets, goals, and so on. I think it's pretty obvious. There are other sports, esports for example, they follow similar patterns, but they're programmed, so cheating's a little different. And I reference cheating now, because there are many that would say, just let them cheat. Those more cynical people or ambitious people are well within their right to say that. There is a comedian by the name of Frankie Boyle, who once suggested if people wanted to take drugs, let them create a separate event just for that. Because seriously, who would not want to see Usain Bolt race a cheetah and a greyhound with all three of them on meth? It would be amusing. Other sports, there are ways around it. Some people use masking agents, in boxing especially. It is quite common for drug users to mask it with inhalers, which is quite irritating, or pre-workouts. That is also quite common, which is why VADA, USADA, or whichever anti-doping agency you want to go to, implement fairly strict testing. Tennis, as far as I'm aware, has one of the strictest, where you have to call someone every day to tell them where you are in case they want to test you. I would love Roger Federer to simply respond, "I just built Hogwarts. Come get me, motherfucker." Of course, if he ever said that, chances are he may be on meth. In other sports, you have people like Lance Armstrong, who used blood transfusions as a way of hiding what he was putting into his body to give himself an edge, which was quite cheeky, I will admit, and it took long enough for him to finally admit he was cheating. In other sports, it has come about because the anti-doping agency, or the rules that the sport in question has introduced a ban on a drug that was up until then okay, but then upon implementing that drug being a banned substance, people still had it in their system from when it was valid. They're not really drug cheats at that point, but it is an interesting subject about cheating. Now, of course, there are other things that fall into the grey area of whether or not it is cheating. For example, you have grunting in tennis. It is a very distracting noise that unless you are deaf, you are going to hear this.
Listen.
Serena Williams, everyone. 100% female. In another sport, let's take snooker. You could be attempting to pot a long shot or a short shot. Somebody could cough the moment you cue. Whether it's cheating or not, then of course an investigation has to take place. There is this murky area around it. And then of course you have the argument of, can you live with yourself if you cheated? But if you want to win and you can get away with it, then do it. It's an interesting subject about morals. I personally won't, even if it is something that would benefit the team, because I want to know I did my best and didn't take a shortcut. The guilt would eat me up. One last sport I want to cover that falls into this bracket of maybe cheating, the kind of murky area of it anyway, was back in 2009 in Formula 1. Braun GP had this fantastic car that Jenson Button drove, along with Rubens Barrichello, and given the choice, I probably wished more that Rubens had won the world title over Jenson, but that's only because we Brits tend to not really give a fuck about fellow Brits succeeding. We like to tear them down. Now the Braun GP team is interesting because they introduced the diffuser, which gave them a huge advantage over everyone else. I think it was a double diffuser. Everyone else may have been using a single, and they used a double, and it did not break the rules, but many called for them to be banned because of cheating, even though it was not. All of this is relevant. It's the area of whether someone has cheated, under what the circumstances are, why they did it, and the murky area of distractions, and bending the rules, but still falling within the rules. So now we've said all of that and wasted enough of your time, I do apologise, but I really wanted to talk about this. I really like sports. Let's talk about darts. You can argue amongst yourselves if it's a sport. If you stay to the end, I'll tell you an anecdote of my own youth playing darts. I promise. Darts has become quite the money machine, courtesy of Barry Hearn of Matchroom. He has managed to turn this into a huge pantomime show, where beer-bellied men, and some women, they have their own competition of course, I'm not going to denigrate it, but let's focus on the men for today because this is where the interesting incident took place. The face of darts for the longest time, well, for the darts that Barry Hearn represents, was Phil the Power Taylor. I never understood the nickname, and he doesn't look like Power, but I won't judge. He has made a lot of money, and he is one of the most famous darts players on the planet. If not the most, actually. I think someone called Wolf, but I think he plays for a different darts league. Maybe the second most famous? Or is it Raymond van Barneveld? He might be second. Oh, I know the names, this is the annoying thing. I know the names, but I haven't kept up with it in a long time. With a number of sports, in fact. And I know darts might not be considered sports, but let's think about it. It's hand archery. How about that? Without all the fucking stabilizers. Darts has gotten into the news not because of the European Championships, which I believe also were going on, but because of an incident that was considered a distraction, and whether or not it was cheating or not, based around a rather potent scent. A scent of rotten eggs, in fact, where accusations now have come up, aimed at Gary Anderson and Wesley Harms, who at the Grand Slam of Darts were both accused of farting. Now come on, you've got to think here. Some footballers will blame poor performances on the pitch, unless you're Gary Lineker, in which case you just blame it on diarrhea. Or Paula Radcliffe on diarrhea. Others, the tactics, boxing especially. But farting, that's a new one, I have to admit. Now, two-time world champion Anderson, he won Thursday's match 10-2 to get to the quarterfinals, but Harms was quick to explain his substandard performance by accusing the Scottish opponent, the two-time world champion, of leaving a fragrant smell. Now, you've got to think here. In tennis you have grunting. Other sports you could just shout, grunt, cough, sneeze. Farting though, a smell. A smell, that's a new level of distraction. And then I look at these men and think, these articles are in the sports section of a news site, and not one of these guys looks like any other athlete in any other sport. These are sportsmen, somehow. This has, by the way, started a new term to investigate this, called FartGate. That's right, everyone. It's a fragrant, scented consumer movement, not a fragrant hate movement. I'm sure this will be confirmed by the FBI, or Barry Hearn. The Dutchman, after he lost, by the way, and he said something that made me chuckle for a while. After he lost, he said, "It'll take me 2 nights to lose this smell from my nose." And for some odd reason, the world number 4, Scottishman Anderson, was not best impressed by the accusation, even though Scottish diets are entirely fried and junk food. Honestly, if I had to sit you and an Indian person in a room together, there's more chance the Indian guy has more of a solid bowel movement than you. And that's because you're Scottish, not because you're fat. Anderson was quoted saying, "If the boy thinks I farted, he is 1010% wrong. I swear on my children's lives that it was not my fault." Translated from him actually saying, "If the fuck thinks I've had a little bit of a he's many numbers wrong." Scottish people can't count. "I swear on my children's dead nan, that ain't my fault." But said that in a Scottish accent, and that's exactly what he said. Going so far as to explain himself in the past, saying he'd had a bad stomach before, and he wasn't going to lie about farting on stage. And every time he walked past the stage, there was a waft of rotten eggs, so that's why he was thinking it was him. Which obviously then raises the question, if it didn't bother the Scotsman and he beat you 10-2, just how delicate is your constitution that you can't handle a little bit of parping or rotten eggs, which could be indicative of BO. I do recall being sat at a job centre next to somebody who smelled like Cornish pasties on one side and rotten eggs on the other, so it could have been BO, just saying. All in all, this is quite amusing and raises many questions about pushing the boundaries in sports to try and put your opponent off, and in a sport where focus is key and it is based entirely on accuracy, one can understand why bad smells would want to be rooted out. Now, as I promised, I would tell you a little story. So for this, we'll go back to 2006. Yeah, some of you weren't born then, I know. The Earth was still flat then, apparently. Not to worry, though. My housemates and I got a foot pump, plugged it into the ground, and just started going nuts. Now, we used to play darts together. We had a really cool dartboard in one of the dorm rooms. We didn't actually play the right way. We should have played long ways. We played in a narrow room, short ways. I had this odd habit. I'd throw really hard, even though I wasn't trying. I'd always hit the metal rims, and it would come back. Yeah, that was painful. The first 100 times. We started introducing forfeits, and the forfeit was, you take some vapor rub on your fingers if you lost, into your index finger and middle finger, a small blob on each finger, rub it in, close your eyes, rub it across, and go for a walk, and see how long you would willingly go for a walk for before you opened your eyes and started to cry. I still have my darts. I couldn't help but notice there was a little blood on them still. Probably should have washed that off 12 years ago. Not the greatest anecdote, I know, but first years, well, we're pretty mental. It's understandable why many people wouldn't trust us to vote. All this aside, FartGate included. Oh, and before I conclude, tonight, at I believe 10 PM, on a friend of mine's channel, Alpha 17 will be released for 7 Days to Die, and he will stream it. I'm going to link his stream in the description below. Please consider going there and subscribing. His channel name is Discanar. So I hope everyone has a lovely Monday, and thank you all for listening. Oh, and yes, I'm going to be on that stream as well. Just saying.